Hello, wonderful ladies. I have a question for you today. Should healing be a lifelong journey? I see that often. I see people talk about that often. They're like, oh, don't worry, healing will be a lifelong journey and that's okay. And um, I, as with everything with toxic relationships, I want to give you a lot of grace. I want to give myself a lot of grace. I Everything that I do and everything that I write and everything that I coach on is about the fact that wonderful women can fall into toxic relationships and they're playing a game they didn't understand, and they're being told everything is their fault, and they're being told they're always the problem, and they're being told that, you know, things that if that person would just behave better, then everything would be fine. And it's a game of constant ups and downs. It's a game of Jekyll and Hyde. It's a game of one day them being nice and one day them being mean, and you thinking, if I just figure out what they want, they'll be happy and I will feel loved. And I've never seen it work, not one time for one woman. Sometimes it's interesting. People say, oh, yeah, we used to have problems, but now we don't. And then I would start researching the relationship, and there would be women who weren't allowed to go to the grocery store by themselves, women who weren't allowed to talk to their children without the husband on the phone. And I thought, you think that's fixed? And these were women who had, this one example that I'm thinking of, she tried to commit suicide. And he was so controlling, she tried to commit suicide, and then he paints her as the bad guy to the children, right? And then as I am interacting with the adult children, I'm saying, what do you mean she's, a woman in her 60s and 70s and can't pick out her own shoes? What do you mean she's not allowed to go to the grocery store by herself? So let me be so clear. That's not a solution, okay? That is not a solution. That is oh gosh, that poor woman. She has spent a lifetime trying to survive toxic relationships, right? And she just shut herself down completely, and it still wasn't enough. Even when she shut herself down completely, she still couldn't earn the right to talk to her daughter by herself, okay? So everything that I do is based on the fact that I think that within a toxic relationship, your strengths can be used against you. Being good, kind, loving, giving, all those things can be used against you. I don't think it's that you're broken or that you have daddy issues or bonding, even though that can happen, which is why I don't think healing should be a lifelong journey. And I think that when you fall into that pattern, to the way a lot of typical therapy works, and there's some great therapists out there and there's some horrible therapists out there, just like there's great teachers and bad teachers and great firemen and bad firemen and good cops and bad cops. Like, it's just like everything else. And there's a lot of therapists out there who do not understand this topic. I can absolutely say that. But I want you to imagine that you're like running an Olympic race, okay? And so you're at the start line, okay? And somebody comes up and they whisper everything you've ever done wrong, every piece that's ever been broken, every fault you made, every mistake you've lost sleep over. They whispered all those things in your ear. And then you tried to run the race. Like, how well do you think you would do? Okay? Or someone came up and they whispered every success you'd had, every time you'd been amazing, every time you'd stood up for someone in need, every time you went after a new dream at work, every time you were kind and patient to your children, even when you wanted to scream at them because everything in your life was so crazy, okay? So how would you run? If you were reminded of all those strengths, how would you run differently, okay? If you had been reminded of all your weaknesses, how would you perform? Versus being reminded of all your strengths, how would you perform? And that's really what's different about what the work I do and the work I think should be done in this process is really reconnecting women who've been through horrific situations with their strengths rather than constantly reminding them of their weaknesses. Are you perfect? No. Did you do some things to contribute to the relationship? Probably, but it's probably not the things that you're beating yourself up for. It's probably believing the best in someone even when they didn't deserve it, or forgiving too easily or not holding, stronger boundaries. It's not you being crazy, you being broken, you, gosh, what all do they say? Being too sensitive, you flirting with a guy at work, it's, uh, always getting mad too easily, you being controlling. Oh my word. Um, and I have a friend, and she's been in a relationship for 6 months, and he called her controlling, and he told her that she had trust issues because he was going on a vacation with another female, and he flipped it on her and told her it was her trust issues because she'd been cheated on before. And y'all are probably like, hello, can I get an amen? Because that happened to me. And so, but those are the things that like toxic people would tell you that was your fault. Oh, your trust issues, your lack of trust, you're acting crazy. I was watching Mad Men last night, and this girl, this wife, was like, I think, if you've ever seen Don Draper, he has so many affairs, and she said, I just have a bad feeling about that woman. He goes, you're just overreacting. That was from 6 years ago. Well, the next scene, that woman's in his bed sleeping with him. Okay, so you probably ignored some red flags. You ignored your intuition. There were some things you did wrong, but it's not the things they told you did wrong. It is none of the things they told you did wrong, because they wanted to flip it around on you so it worked to their advantage. Okay. So I do hope this helps and encourages you on forgiving yourself, but I also hope that it gives you a new look into the healing process and being able to move forward. And I hope that your healing process includes working within your strengths, reconnecting with those strengths, working with the strongest parts of you, with the most kind, with the most forgiving. We get into, I see so often, smart girl syndrome. And smart girl syndrome is that constant questioning and overthinking. Why did this happen? Why did they do that? Why have I tried harder? Because if you're a smart girl, there's probably never a problem you haven't been able to solve if you thought about it long enough. So at some point in the relationship, you thought, if I just work harder, if I just try, if I just grow, if I just change enough, I can solve the problem of this relationship. Which, like I said at the beginning, I have not ever seen it work. I've seen women become shells and stay married. And I've seen women give up dreams and thoughts and not even be able to talk anymore and just spend the rest of their lives controlled. And then people say that worked because they didn't get a divorce, and that's not okay with me. Becoming a shell of a person is not love, and it's not, marriage. Religious traditions talk about covenants, being in covenant with that person, and not being able to break that covenant. And I respect that so much. But the toxic person, when they strip you of your soul and ask you to become a shell of yourself so that they always win, and your job is to contribute to their selfishness, you are not the one who broke the covenant. They broke their own covenant. They got put in a situation all about control, right? So I do not think that the rest of your life should be about someone else controlling you. Even if you're broken up and they're controlling your head, and you're still living in fear, and you're still having nightmares, and you're still scared, and you're still scared to do anything, get help, or scared to move forward in your healing. After a toxic relationship, we get stuck in fight, flight, and freeze. And usually right when you're leaving the relationship, it can be like fight, like, oh, gotta get out. And some women will do some things that they would not normally have done on a regular basis because they're in that fight mode. And then they come to me and they're so sad. And they're like, I can't believe I acted like that. And I said, okay, that's like one little sliver of your life versus the whole, the wholeness of your life, that whole concept. But then they get stuck in freeze and flight. And if you are not fully invested in your healing journey, because there are people in this group and they're like, Sarah, you seem so happy. You're so smiley. You seem so, like life is so good. And I was like, it is now. It is now. Those of you within this group who saw me during the time that I was leaving my untoxic relationship, I mean, I wanted, thought if I don't do something, my body's going to shut down and I am going to die. Like my body was shutting down. I was losing hair and not being able to digest my food, and it was awful. And so people are like, oh, you seem so happy now. And it's like, that's because I took a lot of steps to get there. I took a lot of steps to be happy. I took a lot of steps to doing the right thing, not just doing the busy work, but doing the right steps that moving forward, getting him out of my head and moving on to a life of peace and joy and kindness and love and purpose. And it's pretty amazing on the other side. So I want you to drop the idea that healing has to be a lifelong journey and know that you can get healed and then spend the rest of your life growing rather than healing. So hope that helps. I hope you have a fabulous Sunday. You can drop your favorite growing tips or healing tips down in the comments below, and talk to you soon. Happy healing, warriors.